Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. We've gone record shy now. Jerry, what's happening?
Yeah.
Okay.
I spoke to Sam a couple of hours ago. He should be here in a minute or two.
Sam's here. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Shall we take the register?
Oh, yeah. Sam present. Spent yesterday afternoon with 5 fire engines and an event response unit that had driven up from Southampton. I got out of the shower, looked out the window, and the field opposite was significantly in flame, and it was heading in this direction.
Wow.
So there was every chance that the house would have burnt down yesterday, but fortunately it didn't.
Good Lord. You're okay.
I and the alpacas are fine. There was no power till about 11 o'clock last night because it set fire to 2 pylons. And the railway line on the horizon seems to be intact and functioning. But it was quite a drama.
Yeah, wow.
Scary.
Yes. Goodness me. Let's we won't quite take the register, but we'll have a little shout out. So if you want to put your camera on, by the way, I'd love to see some more faces. Don't worry about what you're wearing or anything like that. There's no dress code here today. So John just put his camera on. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you very much for asking.
Wonderful. Where are you, John? I noticed your accent.
My accent? Yeah, I'm here in Ohio in the United States.
Wonderful. You're very welcome. And good morning to you, right?
Good morning, everyone.
Good. You're in wonderful company. So more cameras have come on. Jazel's put her camera on. That's great. Maria's here. Maria, you've dressed up. It's wonderful. You look very smart.
I always do. Richard, hi.
Hey,
Hi.
great to see you. Looking forward to all of your contributions later on. Henry's here. Hey, Henry. Let's hear your voice, Henry.
Hello, Richard. I'm not sure about my accent, though.
Does everybody think they don't have an accent, by the way? Or do some people think, yeah, I've got an accent?
I got an accent.
I don't have an accent.
You discover it when you speak to others.
I pronounce bath, glass, and grass in just the same way that everyone else pronounces it. So
I want to do an informal empirical poll, and I see Frija's already got that. Do you consider yourself to have an accent? Just put yes if you do, and then maybe where you're from, and then we might we haven't got time to hear everybody's accents. Manahay says definitely I do a beautiful one. Dutch, yes. African accent. So what's my accent then? Surely. Afrikaans, wonderful. 42 of us today. That is absolutely tremendous to see. Welcome to those who are putting the cameras on and those that aren't. I think somebody's got their mic on, so we'll just do a little bit of muting. I'll make a few more people co-hosts as well to help with that. We come here today on Zoom together, right? Because at MKAI, we're just learning together, we're rising together. Yes, we have some invited contributors today, of course, and of course they're very special, but so is everybody else. So let's make sure we very much feel that we're in this together today. And we're learning together, growing together. It's 5 o'clock in the UK. I always say it's sunny in Milton Keynes, but it's not sunny in Milton Keynes today, and I'm not going to lie. So it's a bit grey for once, but we'll brighten up today. You're very welcome to keep your microphones on, but if you've got a bit of background noise, then just keep an eye on that, and so for the team as well. I see some more cameras on. Odelia's here, Xavi's here. Someone's dog is here. And 49 of us. John's here. John Kamara's here. Welcome, John. Great to see you. Nima's here. DNP, Marilyn, Michael, AJ's here. Hey, great to see you. Kula's got the camera on.
Hey, Richard. Good to see you
Hey.
too.
And you, hey, Niven, we're going to be hearing from you in a moment and about that incredible report that you guys have put out. We'll be sharing that and having a chat about it later on. Jachendra's here with those awesome glasses that you were wearing last session as well. X-ray glasses, I don't know, but they look very cool. Tosin, hey, good to see you. Vikas as well, great. So many cameras on, this is wonderful. And welcome to those who are attending for the very first time. If you are, that's wonderful. There's obviously many friendly faces here, middle of the US. Wonderful to say good morning, Tom. Wonderful to say good morning to those who are west of us in the US and those of us that have joined us in the evening. Thank you so much for sparing a little bit of time to come together today and be with us. Our topic today is making the future of work for everyone using our artificial intelligence lens as well. I'll say again, we have invited contributors today, of course, who've prepared some thoughts, but we are all here together. This is not one of your webinars where we have a panel and everybody else is hidden behind. We purposely throw ourselves in the mix to be as inclusive, open, friendly, kind, happy as possible. I'd love to see lots of friendly debate on the chat. To get that going, I'd love to see some more introductions from people. Just a couple of lines about who you are, maybe what you're working on. Why not put your LinkedIn URL in there? Then people can follow you or connect with you. You're very, very welcome to do that. It's not a sacred space. It's a great space for getting to know everybody. And we're certainly in great company tonight. Just hit 59 of us here. That's a wonderful number. So, and use that chat, raise questions. Let's have some friendly banter going on perhaps as well, but of course, keep it kind. We're not here to be the smartest. We're not here to be right. We're here to be together and grow together and understand how the convergence of these incredible technologies influencing our lives, our society, our businesses, our finances, our love life, everything together as we come together at this time. So welcome to Ali in Nigeria. Thanks for putting yourself on the chat. So we've got a lot to get through today. I'm going to be talking a little bit later on about an initiative that MKAI is launching around diverse perspectives or diverse inputs for AI risks. And once we've heard from a speaker or two, I'll give you a little bit more information about how to get involved in that really exciting process. The guys from Wapley are here. We've just published their digital trust report. I'm going to be asking them to talk about that in just a moment. We've got some interesting filters going on. Frisia, that's an awesome one. That just caught my eye and made me laugh halfway through. We're going to be hearing from Animesh a bit later on as well. He's written this article about the future of work. So we'll get a quick word from him on that and share that URL as well. 66 of us now. We are recording, so if you have to dash off early, do not fret. Just find that MKAI channel on YouTube or give us a nudge or look for us on LinkedIn, and we'll definitely be sharing all the materials there. A quick thank you to Data Reply UK as well, who put a little bit of sponsorship towards MKAI without demanding that we cover certain things or we don't talk about certain things. So isn't that very, very cool? They let us just get on and be ourselves. And supporters, I chatted with them earlier on about some new initiatives that we're thinking about. They're tremendous. So just Google Data Reply UK if you want to learn more about them and the work they do. Welcome, Tom Ives. Indeed, it's always a great pleasure to have you here. I'm running out of voice already. I better, I get too emotional, honestly, when we all come together like this every month. So topic today, making the future of work for everyone. I'll give my voice a little break, and I'm going to ask Vibhab to open the session for us today with a few thoughts about what this means and the preparation we've been doing, some of the boundaries of our discussion today, and to put this conversation in context of time and space. So Vibhab, with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richard. Welcome everyone to the MKAI Inclusive Forum. This is the one event of the month where you get to put your AI cap on and think on different issues and take the conversation forward. Today's topic is making the future of work for everyone. And before we get into our panel discussion and thereafter everyone getting involved in the session, I just want to break this topic into components just to open up this topic. Making the future work for everyone. There are different components of what we're exploring today. The first part is making. Making in that sense means leadership, vision, maybe a sense of fairness. And this goes to the root of the fact that if, and on going to the root, if AI is supposing tomorrow AI's interaction with work, if AI replaces jobs, then what is my leadership? Which direction am I thinking, and what am I doing right now with that idea in mind? And that connects with making and work for everyone. So it requires leadership and action. The future. The second component of this, another important component of this talk today is the future. Now, how far are we looking into the future? And this point being, this ties to the fact, and many people might know here, the concept of how artificial intelligence at times gets confused with artificial general intelligence, rise of machines, robots, whereas an artificial narrow intelligence is task specific, a pattern recognition too. So when we're talking about the future, how far ahead in the future are we looking at? Because that's an important point. And then the last point of our discussion, work for everyone, which means what, who, before we talk about making the future work for everyone, another component is what is the situation today? Who is not in the room today? What is encompassed in this concept of everyone? And this again ties back to the point of future and how are we looking at AI. In the context of work, when we're looking at AI and work, are we looking at it as a coexistence between, say, humans and robots or other AI tools that will impact work, coexistence in the way that we're living, or are we looking at collaboration? And moving back and coming to the and connecting back with cooperation and collaboration, another important point that we need to look at is what is AI? When we're looking at AI and work, have we defined artificial intelligence or the term AI incorrectly? Should we look at it as augmenting human intelligence? Is it collaboration or competition? Just a couple of thoughts. We have a great panel for you, and just to summarize, making leadership action future. How far are we looking? What's the time period? And what is encompassed in everyone? Just opening up the topic, and the last point about how to make work more equitable, the workplace more equitable in this context. Over to you, Richard. I have just opened up the discussion for the discussion. Yeah.
Vibhav, thank you so very much. I'm going to spotlight. Hello, Lavina. Great to see you. I'm going to spotlight certain people now. So I'm spotlighting John. I'll put myself on just for a moment. John, how are you?
Very well, Richard. Good to connect from Nairobi. Hello, everyone.
John, you've spoken for us before when it felt like about 3 weeks ago, but it's a long time ago now, wasn't it?
Yes, well, it's a long time ago, but it feels like yesterday.
Does anybody remember John speaking last time at MKAI? It was about 2004. No, it was a year or so ago. John, what's your journey been like since you were last here? You just seem to be doing so much incredible work, if you don't mind me saying.
No, it's been good. We started the AI Center of Excellence, which was really based around creating talent in the future work and making sure that a lot of people had the required knowledge and skills to participate in this new economy, but also retrain people as well too. I think since the last spoke, we've trained almost 200 AI engineers and data scientists, and we're actually starting another cohort again. We've created a job for over 100 people in that same space, but also we're now starting another program where we're looking at people who are in one particular type of job economy that AI is becoming important in their job, and how to give them the skills to be able to participate without necessarily thinking that they're going to lose their jobs. We're doing a lot of knowledge transfer for CEOs and leaders of organizations across. We're working with the UN. So yeah, it's been a very interesting journey. We've built another 21 startups across 5 markets in Africa. So it's been fun.
I hope you're taking time out as well, John.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, we do. I think part of it is we get to travel around the continent. We meet so many people. I mean, last in February we met almost 800 people. Just talking across 5 markets in Africa, interviewing startups who are doing stuff in deep tech, interviewing people who wanted to participate in our programs. We went as far as Swaziland to now start training data scientists in Swaziland. That's how exciting it's been.
Amazing. I'm sure you've got some friends here in the audience tonight, Jesse. I know Jesse knows you and we know Jesse, so that's very cool. We're pulling our weight as well, John. We just agreed terms with the Southern African Institute of Aviation Science and Technology, where we're going to be training hundreds of young Zambians in Python via Rupa Singh, our partner, and also doing special sessions just for women as well to develop them. So a fraction of what you're doing, John, but hopefully a little bit of support from this side.
It all counts. It's all important because especially in the continent where things are exploding really fast and there's so much data being collected across so many different levels of opportunity. I mean, if you look at the economy of the startups here alone, from 2020 when we first started speaking, where we had probably less than $1 billion, this year we're expecting $12 billion in terms of funding coming into the continent. So you can see what that means in terms of create, and a lot of it also has to do with creating new types of jobs. I mean, the job specs have changed so much that you now really need to, have people become more dynamic and have different types of skills layered on the current skills they have as well. Because again, it's not all very technical skill sets required to function in this same economy. Sometimes it's just, understanding different types. We're doing stuff around ethical AI and ethics with some of the government folks in a few countries. So I think everything counts, especially if we truly are to embrace the fourth industrial revolution in Africa. Then knowledge and the future of work is one of the most critical things for us to sustain the growth that is happening.
And we were really worried about the skills gap and the digital divide last time we spoke. And let's have that 2020 maybe as the marker for that. We've spoken obviously many times since. What moment stays in your head over the last couple of years when you saw something or someone or a business? Where was the moment when you thought we're really getting somewhere with bridging that digital divide?
I think just this year actually has been quite interesting. Late last year, NVIDIA came with a bunch of programs doing here. We've seen Google just started also looking to, we've seen Microsoft also, so we're gonna, create centers, we're gonna train people. We're also seeing a lot of new organizations come up. Then, also late last year, early this year, with the likes of funding for InstaDeep and Zindi in the AI space, for the first time in the continent, it was like, yes, finally, somebody's taking note that we're actually also doing stuff in AI in Africa, and it actually makes sense. So those moments for me have been, signing up UNCDF to do a project for them in AI, train people, was a great win for me, and so there's a lot of other folks as well who just jumped in and just doing some really incredible stuff to try to get the skills gap divide. And what we're also seeing, we're seeing quite a lot of people, especially in the UK actually, who are joining with giving their time, just time, donating time to different projects, Data Science Nigeria, those guys are still pushing hard. There was a program that they just finished launching in, I think it was in Uganda as well, which is an AI program as well too, by some really incredible folks. So I think there's a lot of interesting things happening and in that first layer of education and knowledge acquisition, but also I think going further down and actually also trying to upskill people in specific type of jobs, not necessarily technical skills, but how to actually, participate in this changing economy. So again, it's not just technical skills, right? It's also just learning how to participate and how to change and to become, viable in this new economy. So that is also what I'm finding light bulb moments like, wow, okay, this is interesting, how you begin to do that as well.
Yeah, and leading, right? Leading differently. There's plenty of problems in the world we replicated by our youth, right? So wherever they are. John, how do you prevent, or maybe you don't, but there's the silos of innovation? Because I mean, if anybody hasn't read the news lately, you're really not seeing what's happening in Kenya, Rwanda, obviously Nigeria. We could mention South Africa, of course. I mean, these are hot spots, full stop. They're so exciting. But, you know, is it becoming siloed, do you think, in that continent?
Yeah, so what I'm also seeing is, you know, since I started the lab as well, Daniel Lab and the AI Center of Excellence, one of the things we see the big markets where we participate in Nigeria, Kenya, you know, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, maybe a little bit Ghana. But what we're also then seeing is there's beginning to be a divide between those big countries and the second and third tier countries, where, you know, you're beginning to see Zambia. There's a big play for, you know, data, IP, ethics, AI in Zambia. You see Uganda, but there's still a lot of, you know, the French-speaking countries, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Cameroon. But then if you take those away, there's still so many countries. Remember, there's 54 countries in the continent where a lot of them, nothing's happening. And that means the divide will get, you know, bigger and bigger. So we're beginning to see a few folks and myself just, you know, intentionally go into these countries and saying, look, we're going to try to do things here. So again, case in point, I went to Swaziland and everybody asked me, what are you doing in Swaziland? It's such a small country. It's
a great country.
Yeah, but the idea was like, if you don't go to this place, they will be left behind again in this thing that is happening. You know, there's Niger, there's Mali. So, you know, there's all these smaller, there's Malawi. So I think that those countries where also they need a lot more help, not just only your Nigerians, your Kenyans. And Nigerians and Kenyans, they're beginning to find how to survive now with everything that's happening. Now is the focus on the second and third tier countries. How do we make sure we bridge that divide in those places? Because when everybody talks, all they want to do is talk about going to Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, you know, Egypt. I would like people to think a little bit differently now. How do we go to those other type of countries that really truly need our help even a lot more than the Nigerians?
That's a great message, John. And again, you know, we are here many miles behind you, but we're supporting. Just started working with the Malawi government, would you believe it, on some projects. We're talking about rewriting some of the policies there. You know, we'll see how it goes, but yeah, I'd give a shout out to Animesh. She's leading our government program over there, and that's where we're starting, right? It probably means I'm not going to get a Ferrari anytime soon, John, if I'm honest, but...
No, but you wake up in the morning feeling great, and look at what I just did.
Too right. John, we're just spotlighting on you for a bit, and if you had a talk prepared, then I've probably completely kiboshed you, just wanting to ask you so many questions. But what does this title mean to you? When we invited you to Making the Future of Work for Everyone, like, what was your reaction? What was on your mind? What does this mean to you?
I think the first thing, because I've had quite a few sessions around the future of work, but the first thing I thought about was people in everyday lives in this continent where I travel around who say, you know, I'm just a marketing person and AI is going to take away everything that I know how to do. I'm not talking about the data scientists anymore. I'm not talking about the AI engineers. We know the problem but I'm talking about the first thing that came was all these other people who work in all these different other type of careers who are thinking, oh my God, AI is literally, you know, I work in customer support. They don't need me anymore because they now have tools, but they have, you know, customer experience, AI products that's gonna. So it was, how do we make these people become part of this economy that is growing? What are the skills we need to give them for them to be relevant, viable, and consistent in the globalization of the AI economy? So that was really what I wanted to talk about and open the floor to people and say, you know, love to get ideas of how, you know, we can help. What are the programs these people need to go to? What are the courses they need to, how do they need to reapply themselves? You know, I got a question before I came on this program. Somebody says, I work in marketing, and all of a sudden, half of my job is being done by these experiential tools. And companies are selling my company stuff all the time. And so what do I do? Because I might be made redundant at some point. And it was a question that hit me because we always talk about the data scientists and the AI engineers, but There are so many other sectors where, as we grow and we become more, AI savvy, data savvy, then there's all these people in this other space that we also need to make savvy somehow to participate and become relevant. So that was the biggest challenge for me when I started thinking about this topic, that if I didn't talk about all the stuff we need to do in AI, how can we help these people? And unlocking those people, unlocking their potential, making them part of the process, part of the growing. And those people represent a huge population in the continent of the economic growth. Because again, if you look at what has happened with data scientists or AI engineers, their salaries have tripled and quadrupled even in this continent, right? But the same marketing person or the same customer support are earning the same type of money. Not a lot has changed much. So they're even on the verge of becoming a little bit more redundant. So, for the first time, I did understand what they were afraid of when I took some more time to really in-depthly analyze why they were afraid about the future of work. So for me, the punchline was the future of work. How does it work for everyone? Not just people who are data scientists or AI engineers. And that's what I want to open the floor with.
Okay, we're in for some fun tonight, John. You've set us up for a great debate. What I hear from you saying that, it's great to teach these technical skills. And, we're going to Zambia and we are, via Rupa Singh and AI Beehive, we are teaching Python. But I always feel that, you're sort of teaching people to catch up. And that's a missed opportunity. So it's those leadership skills, creativity skills, confidence skills, so that you don't have nations just trying to find works. Look at what India's doing now, right, in terms of taking command of its own destiny. Whereas what was happening before, just a brain drain, the work was going on in India and the patents were being, managed and owned elsewhere in the world. And, it's stuff like that that, really gets me excited. So, John, stay with us. And,
I want to hear what people have, the ideas that we can take back to see how we use these ideas to really galvanize everybody to become valuable and also to be able to actually benefit from this new future of work. So I'm all ears. I'll sit back here and just listen in and take my notes.
I think we'll get you saying a few things as well, John, but you're obviously 1,000% welcome to anything that we ever do. And it's so wonderful to be here with you. And thanks for getting us started today. Obviously joined by Jaisal Sarana. Where would I be without Jaisal on these sessions? Hey, how are you?
I'm absolutely doing great. And I think I'm just stunned with the insights that John has shared, especially with the kind of work that we are doing. It is so much in alignment to it. And I'm looking forward to this whole panel, because we're already into the future, I would say, for the the work to, materialize actually. And I'll welcome all the panelists. I think we need to add Timmy as well.
Yeah, Timmy and Maria, if you can help with those.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm very slow at multitasking. John, those movies where they have like a world president in like 2200 or something like that? That's what I'd vote you for. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, Sam. Sam, just do a quick turbo introduction to you, if you don't mind.
Hello, Richard. Hello, everyone. Really awesome to be here. I'm a data science specialist recruiter for Austin Fraser. So essentially, that means I spend all my day speaking to data scientists, AI engineers, the companies that recruit for them, and yeah, it's great to be hearing about all these sorts of projects and all the different applications of AI. So yeah, that's basically what I do.
Wonderful. You're very, very welcome. Look forward to hearing those insights from you. Dr. Nima Pasha, welcome.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you. So I spoke, I think, at one of your very first online Zoom things when everyone was on mute and unmuted a couple of years ago. So thank you for having me back, even though it probably made a mess of the time then. So I'm looking at the future of work from the perspective of skills. I'm looking at the future of work from the perspective of what the impact of digital change will be, and also I'm also director of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I've just written, I sort of headed up a major piece of research looking at race equity in the workplace. Whilst it's UK based, it's had a big impact. And I just wanted to say something. Do you mind if I threw a hand grenade into the discussion, Richard? Richard's nervous, but let's do it. What I'm going to say is that I was with a large corporate yesterday who were talking about race equity and their commitment to it. They're UK and US based, and their work in India is becoming increasingly challenging. So their work around AI, talent, skill, recruitment and development, they're finding it hard because of the political changes that are going on in India to recruit as fairly as they wanted to do. So some of the things that we're experiencing around, our talent onboarding, development, in terms of the whole title about a fairer world in the future that everybody has equity to, has so many influences, not just politics, just the impact of the coronavirus, but other areas as well. So I'm really happy to talk about some of those things. But I just thought I'd throw that in because it's a real influence that we may have to think that's going around us.
Yes, thank you so much. And hand grenade caught and then tossed safely somewhere else, like in the movies where you get ages before you have to throw it. Maria, welcome to you. I said hello very briefly earlier on.
Yes, hi, Richard. Good day, everybody. And my name is Maria McAndrew. I am based here in Ecuador, and I'm currently the head of diversity and global education at AI Ethics World. In addition, I'm a writer, I'm a social impact entrepreneur, and I'm really passionate about AI and AI ethics, as well as how AI can play a critical role in reducing global socioeconomic inequalities. And here in Ecuador, I currently work with local community development initiatives. I actually collaborate with local organizations, and we work to empower Afro-Ecuadorian youth, women and children. And as part of my commissions, really, I advocate for fair practices and equal opportunities for all, particularly in artificial intelligence. And like I always say, in all our efforts, I believe that we must be looking for ways to ensure that developing communities have the tools and opportunities to grow and evolve while keeping up with current technological advances, and that no one must be left behind, like you've all said before. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to learn from this panel as well as from the audience. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Maria, and that's very eloquently said as well, beautifully said, in fact. We have the ability to spotlight 9 people. John's just turned his camera off for a second, but that still would be 2 more spaces. So, Maria, as you say, we're here to learn together, and we'd be glad to have a couple of our attendees come and join this as well, impromptu. It's always fun. But Timmy, how are you?
I'm very well, Richard.
It's good to see you.
Good to be here today. Yes, and good to see everyone too. You know, it's an important subject matter and a key foundation for the conversation going forward. Because, like I like to say, if the foundation be destroyed, what can the makeup artist do? The ladies know better.
Timmy, how could I have this conversation without you? You'd message me and go, what were you doing? Why would you have me there? You would say. So you're welcome. And whereabouts are you? Obviously, I know the answer, but for
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. I'm Timmy Olagoju. I work in the intersection of law, policy, and technology. Recently, more focusing on AI cloud computing. And so in the course of the conversation, some of the things that come to mind and we might touch on from my own end is basically, as a policy regulatory person, looking at mapping the important stakeholders in driving the evolution of what the future of work should be, ideally, and also identifying the principles underlying that future, as well as what are the roles of some of the stakeholders in shaping the core principles around the future of work. What is the role of regulation and, much more broadly, policies in shaping the future of work, as well as the previous speakers that talked about gaps in developing countries, and what is the role of stakeholders in terms of policies and laws in closing that gap, which is one of the key things, MKAI is trying to do in Zambia, like you mentioned. And also, lastly, what role does AI play in shaping the future of work? So basically looking at all that interconnectedness of policy, law, artificial intelligence, and the future of work in between it all. Thank you.
It's that convergence, isn't it, Tim, you described so well. Jason, so we're doing a sort of Graham Norton approach tonight. I'm not sure which one of us is supposed to be Graham Norton here, Jason or me, but where, you know, our virtual couch has got a kind of spotlighted guest to start with. I've introduced all of you, or asked you to, so that you feel very, very encouraged to actually join in that conversation. You don't feel that you need to sit back at all. Same for everybody that's here, still 90 of us here, which is wonderful. Jason, what do you want to ask Timmy first?
I think Timmy has already mentioned a lot of things into his introduction, what he's going to be talking about. But I think to start with, and being foundational, you know, we want to understand what are these principles that you have been talking about, which govern the future of work? What do people want to look at? I think we need to start looking at those perspectives that you want to share.
So quickly is the fact that, you know, in the core conversation about the future of work, one key element there is work, right? And one of the key things in work is the fact that you're talking about culture, you're talking about profitability, because you cannot have work if there is no sustainability measure that ensures that work continues. And then you're talking about continuity. So the three key principles for me, I summed as PPS. You know, in mathematical format, you might have P raised to power 2S, right? Which is the fact that first, in the future of work, the core principles built around people, because without people, we can't talk about the future, right? And then the second is productivity, right? And in productivity, you're talking about, you know, the culture, you're talking of profitability, you're talking of impact. And then the third principle is sustainability. And I think if we want to have foundational conversations around that future, we need to establish that the principle of work, the principles of the future of work as it relates to artificial intelligence must be built around people, productivity, and sustainability.
Right. I think this is beautiful, isn't it, Richard?
I think it's crucial. It's actually one of the big debates going on in the States right now. If you look at what Joe Biden's talking about, you know, we've had a history. I mean, don't forget that, you know, Obama was down at Amazon HQ just a few years ago celebrating and telling the world how many orders per second were coming in at Christmas. And the reason it's being celebrated is because it was ticking the two boxes, and the only two boxes that mattered. You know, was this company competitive in terms of pricing? And was it helping the consumer? That was it. And that had enough to have the president celebrating. And now, you know, Timmy, you're going beyond that. And this is what we're realizing about big tech, of course, as well, and the harms that some of it has done, is that you've got to look wider. And so Biden famously said, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism. You know, it's just, you know, it's just taking advantage, isn't it? Paul, what do you want to say?
I just wanted to add one comment, which I think is really important, that it comes in quite early in our imagination of the future of work. And it reminds me, as I actually sit here with my cat, sharing a sofa with me, is about the word dignity. And actually, dignity has been used very specifically in the 70s and 80s around the dignity of workers in the developing world. But also, we've talked about dignity when we make people redundant, and when we, you know, our HR. And actually, we also talk about in agriculture about the dignity of animals. And AI is going to be carrying out work, and we can't predict exactly what form that will take. But my sense will be that we will start anthropomorphizing and naming our AI as we currently do. And it could well be that AI develops in ways that are very anthropomorphized or not. But I think we have to imagine the future of work has to get to grips with what is going to be the dignity of work carried out by AI. And if we don't do that, I think it will be too late when we do it later.
I think that's a very valid point. And Timmy, back with you. When you were listening to John earlier and some of the questions and the areas that John was hoping we would get to, what was resonating with you particularly from what you were hearing?
Oh, well, interestingly, you talked about the digital divide and the fact that that divide is beginning to have layers. In countries like my country, Nigeria, you have Kenya, you have South Africa, taking a making leap progress in some sense, maybe not in comparison to perhaps Europe, right? But making some leap progress than the others. And that divide is a reality, right? And so what comes to mind for me as a policy person is the fact that then what really is the role of stakeholders within this national boundaries to drive that kind of development that they require, right? That can make them be at par with their peers in that sense. And so that brings to mind the fact that, you see, without stakeholders like the government, right? Without stakeholders, when we talk about the future of work, like employers, without stakeholders like employees working together, right? There's limited work we can do as, outsiders or nonprofits trying to help develop that future, right? Because the future of work can only be built much better where there are policies in place, like, MKAI and Zambia government is trying to do, right? And when their employers are taking on the initiative to drive what Paul talked about, which is the intersection between, the dignity of, work and an AI or technological development in that sense, built around people, productivity, and sustainability. Without government playing a key role, we might not be able to make progress. And so that's where we need to also look at, when Paul talked about dignity, something came to mind. The International Labour Organization, I think that is one subject that needs to really be pushed at that level, in the sense of international, not state actors playing a role in driving what the principles of the development of AI should be as the future of work evolves, right? And so those are some of the things that come to mind, that sense.
I'll come to Jaisal again to perhaps bring in some of the other panel. We chatted with the government of the Philippines just last week, Timmy, and they told us that their strategy around AI and beyond was named Build, Build, Build. And we're going to get into this with them. But of course, my first reaction was, wow, that doesn't sound like sustainable, when you say it like that. Do you think there's going to be a missed opportunity here, coming back to what you were saying about dignity, respect, empowerment, autonomy, that certain countries are thinking, we've got to build to keep up. We've got to put the pressure on to keep up. We've got to innovate to keep up. We don't have time for all this kind of respect the worker, dignity, flexibility, empowerment stuff. It's going to have to wait.
Well, that's where the challenge is. And that's why this kind of conversation is quite important at this point in time, right? Such that people know that you cannot build AI, which is an enabler in some sense, in silos. It must be built based on certain fundamental principles. Because when you say build, 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 without incorporating people, sustainability, and productivity into the build, what you have is that you're building a house on a sand. And when the wind comes, it is not sustained. It gets blown away. So that's where I talked about the fact that, you see, international non-state actors like the ILO, like the World Trade Organization and the likes, must begin to develop more robust principles and push these principles as key elements for countries to start to observe or take into cognizance as they develop their AI framework for the future of work in their countries. Thank you.
I think for the points that Timmy has been covering, I would like to hear from Dr. Naima if she has some thoughts around this, because these are the key areas that we are looking at, especially the divide in the developing countries and the points that have been shared by John and Paul as well. Yeah, especially the three principles the core principles that Timmy has shared. Naima, what are your thoughts around this?
Thanks, Jaisal, and what Timmy said, and also, listen to John as well. Really important, really interesting. What I would say is that we I think where we're getting a push for more equity, and reading some of the posts in the chat as well, looking at where the push for dignity is actually coming from the corporate, the startup sector, rather than at the moment government, because government is obviously influenced by a whole range of things. And I mentioned the India situation where this large global organization yesterday saying that they're taking out recruitment from Delhi into trying to look for other areas in India to recruit so they can recruit Muslim workers, because they have a factor for, in terms of dignity in AI and data is one of the things. The other thing they want to do is to recruit, talking of dignity as well, Paul very insightfully put up, is the type of work around data as well. They said, for example, in UK firms, when we look at race differences in UK firms, we might find high numbers of Black and Asian workers, but they might well be at lower levels, catering, portering, and so on, whereas less at more senior levels. The danger they talked about is that when we look at labour forces across the world, that recruiters will be looking at the equivalent in terms of AI development and technology coming from India, Africa as well, where we want higher level of people. They are aware of the brilliance of people around the world, but because of the mindset, which is still inequity, is recruiting a particular type of skill set from India, Africa, other parts of Asia, than recruiting a particular skill set in UK and Europe and US, and they're conscious of that. So there's two things they wanted to do. So there's one, I think, Jason, one of the things that might be one, perhaps a hopeful push, and picking up on Richard's conversation about capitalism, is that maybe the market can push us into more equitable work and more dignified work if that's where they feel investment is coming from. And I think you've talked about the MKAI ESG investment, environmental, social and corporate governance type of investment, which might be in its early stages, might be not well kind of viewed in some ways, but the data is coming through that there's more and more investment, particularly as millennials around the world are looking at a type of investment that they want to put in, and then Generation Z coming up behind them saying that they want to actually start investing in organizations that treat people fairly, that focus on climate, they focus on equality, human rights, focus on anti-corruption, diversity and inclusion and responsibility. Not least, because this is where the capitalist part of it comes in, is that I'm just looking up at the moment from Bain saying most public top quartile ESG companies outperform their industry. So it kind of makes financial, business and human dignity sense as well. And of course, AI development is critical to part of that as well.
I'll ask Jaisal to comment in a second. If you don't mind saying, Nima, I understand that you're in and out of some pretty significant corporate offices on a regular basis. Do you typically leave with a quiet smile of hope? Or are you leaving shaking your head thinking this is just wash?
Thank you. I mean, when you said that, or leaving it like I'm going in and stealing all the merch and coming out again, but I go in and because I'm invited.
I think I was suggesting you were stealing from their offices. I'm not sure if that was it.
I'll get the stationery, the cooking oil, obviously, because that's gone up now. Anything that's lying around, I'll take. The thing is, these are things that are so complex. We all want to say things like we should have dignity, we should work well, and we should have equity in our workplaces. And yet the forces against us, the people here, the 88 people here, are quite strong. So it's this force field. We're trying to push against a lot of pressure against us, and we're trying to find our route through it. It's like a tsunami in a way that we have to push through to make our difference. If we didn't, we'd just get pushed over, but at least we're making some strides to push back. My experience and going into firms is that because I don't think, this is my view, is that because I don't think they connect up entirely, and I've talked about this, Richard, previously with you, that HR teams aren't particularly talking to marketing teams, the data development teams aren't talking to the finance teams so as well as they could do. So what happens is is that an idea will come through and it's processed by one team, processed by another team, and then it's moved on. So if you're looking at something like equity and fairer work and looking at paying people well and having decent work and, you know, using a very strong supplier chain, it's got to come from the top and it's got to go through all the way through. And it's up to really people like us and people who are doing startups and to make this culture and resist what we have when we come up against it. And you know, your work here and MKAI is supporting us to do that. You know, it's giving us kind of that connection. But yeah, no, I don't feel that hopeful. But then I don't feel we should stop fighting.
It does sound like you're describing the wind is going the right direction, even if we're in that tornado, whatever you called it a moment ago. I wonder if we should talk about perspective then. And I'm going to just do a small, just momentary break in this conversation and ask a couple of our special friends to say a quick hello, just spotlighting them for a moment now. So I just want to say hello to AJ and Vikas. We've been talking and working with these guys for a little bit of time now. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much, Richard.
So we had the great pleasure of publishing your trust report, Digital Trust Report 2022, just last week. I wanted to highlight that to this group. So I wondered, while I just dig out the URL for that, could you both just for about maybe 60 seconds, just talk about why this was created, the kind of impact you hope it would make, and then why it's worth a few minutes of time to read it.
Awesome. Let me just maybe give a little bit of a background there. First of all, this is a great panel and great discussion that we are part of. Thank you so much, Richard and MKAI, for getting us here. First of all, my introduction, I'm Vikas Malhotra. I am a founder and the CEO of Wapli Technologies, which is a new startup. And I have about 25 plus years of experience in doing a lot of digitalization around the world, including the cloud services, and have pioneered many things. Now, Wapli Technologies, the vision is that we want to make our experiences as we work, play, learn, live, which are the 4 words actually that formed the word Wapli, to be safe, fair, and trusted. And as part of our research and the thesis around, you know, why we formed Wapli and what we are doing around these things, we have been obviously working in a lot of different areas. And as part of that thing, we thought that this was a good time to write something that will raise awareness on this area of cyber trust and the deficit around it and why it is such an important issue. So we brought it out as a report, Cyber Trust Landscape Report 2022, which you know, along with my my colleague Ajay Singh, you know, so we have published it, and thank you so much MKAI for publishing it for us. We wanted to raise awareness, and also going forward, we want to make this as an annual offering from Wapli Technologies, so that, you know, we keep on the agenda and keep discussing these issues and actually figure out new things out there.
Thank you so much. And just in case it's not clear, this is not a commercial agreement. You know, this is just us supporting great work when we see it. If you're doing great work, let us know, you know, and if we can support it, we will. We just want to see these guys get more eyes on this work. So inviting them here today, sharing that report via our website, it's a privilege and honor to do. So thank you both for your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and that report is in the chat. Have a look at it. Make sure you save it and enjoy. Right, Jaisal, back with you.
Absolutely. I think, you know, I would like to ask some questions to Naima further. If you know, it's important to understand why we talk about, because she's raised the point of equity and not equality, which is generally the term a lot of people want to use. Why the difference, and what is it that drives equity and the statistics around it?
Of course, thanks, Jay. So thanks for catching me out just as I was taking that drink as well. It was very good. Well, I'm really happy to talk about that because that's actually my latest research I did. It's about 9 months old now, but it was published it in June of 2021 around why equality can actually make it's the hidden unfairness of equality, we called it. And if we imagine I talked to you about if we imagine what the difference between equity and equality, what we're saying with equity is that some people, because of the disadvantages they've had, will need more support either at work or through education or whatever it is. And the example I talked to you about, Jason, last time was about supermarkets in many supermarkets around the world. What they're saying, an equal approach was everybody who needs to do some shopping, just get to the supermarket, park where you can, go in and buy your stuff and you'll go. Whereas a lot of supermarkets will say, if you have mobility problems, if you've got younger children, you probably need a bit more of an extra kind of support getting in. So you're not getting, because of, having to get all that stuff out or wheelchair, whatever you may have because of mobility, trying to get into the supermarket, you're just making it fairer. So that's what the difference between equity and equality is. And the research, just to highlight here, which I think works well if we're talking about what fairer work should be, is that what the research showed that I looked at race equity, and it showed that there's high level of racism. Around 30% of business leaders still feel there's racism is prevalent in UK workforces. Some of the, and we looked at the FTSE 350 firms, 100 of those, and some of those are global firms as well. So they're talking about global experiences of race. And it was specifically about race, but I also looked at religion as well. And the findings, the main finding again, and it's a little bit about, and I talked about ESG just now, is that those firms that invested in practical, equitable solutions actually perform much better, so much better that my research showed that they performed, their revenue was 58% higher than those that didn't. And all the data behind it and all the other kind of reports that McKinsey and Bain and EY have done and academic research as well, exactly the same. 58% is a huge number, but actually it shouldn't shock us, because if we feel included in a workplace, if we feel valued, if we feel our voice is heard, if we feel our skills are kind of recognized and we can develop those and we're not going to be, criticized or put down or being vilified, then of course we're going to do better. And if we do better, the organization does better. It's no wonder that we get the 58% revenue increase. It could even be higher if we really kind of thought about it. And the data was, we took out Corona at the time of the pandemic. We took out outliers of large corporations that could invest it. And so it was, tried to make it as, sensible as possible. So it was a really solid piece of research, I think, and a lot of organizations have taken it forward. So I think that's one of the key things. In terms of AI development, a lot of our discussions that we have are around AI bias that's built in, and we still see to this day biases that are coming through the program, particularly around race bias as well. And one argument might be, well, we'll just get the use cases out. Let's have more experience of it, and then the AI will learn and kind of understand the difference between looking at primates and saying this is a black person to what we had in Facebook did quite recently. We need to stop this, because the impact of things like that is so detrimental, it's so devastating, that we can't have that happening. There is no dignity, to use the earlier term that we have. The way to overcome that is that we embed equity across the whole organization. We don't say, we'll just do equity over here with an HR department, or I'll look after equity because I'm into that kind of thing. We kind of think this is who we are. We are an equitable organization. From, we decide that, the CEO decides it, the startup owner decides it, and then that's it. And then you start putting it in across the whole organization. Thanks, Yasser.
So potentially we are saying it's a whole mindset change. It's just not saying that, we are moving towards equity, but it's a whole mindset change for every person in the organization. That's what potentially you are saying.
Yeah,
but starting with the CEO, right? And can you change the mind of a CEO, Nima, or do you have to wait until the new CEO comes in?
No, you can start with, because there's influence, because we've had a lot of influence as well. So again, the ESG investment, we got push from the market saying this is what we're looking for. We get a push from to some governments, not all governments, saying that we should move in this way, and then CEOs start moving forward. And I think this is why the equity effect research is so good, because it's a business proposition. I'm not talking about this from a social justice proposition, even though it is fair and social and what kind of world that we want to live in, but we need to understand that we also live in a world that people need to pay mortgages or buy food and send their kids to school. So the business argument is absolutely important. So I think the equity effect, that's what we work on. They make that commitment. You don't give it to HR. Sorry, HR people, if you're here. You give it, you kind of own it in the main part.
You're very welcome if you are. Disclaimer.
But we can't give the burden of this just for HR to own. It's got to be owned by the whole of by the senior management, cascading it down. And just, Jason, just to finish off how we take this forward, it's a simple process of education. We all know this, again, on the call, that this is important, but outside of this call, who are we working with? What are we doing to push forward for a more equitable workforce? And that means what are we reading? How are we educating? What language are we using to make this, what activity we got here? And I did this talk, just quickly, I'll say, I did this talk at work, and Richard Bocox on the call here stepped up and said, I will help you to do this. So it sometimes does happen that you just can, people are quite moved to sort of say, I'll come forward and work. So I just want to say thank you to Richard and Richard, all Richards.
I don't represent all Richards, not yet. I've applied, but it's a really slow process. I'm curious. I keep hijacking the conversation, Jason. Sorry, I get too excited. But we're speaking about leadership there, and we're speaking about a fairer world and equity. I'm curious on the chat, a yes or no. What do people think about Elon Musk taking over Twitter? Do you sense that is moving us towards a fairer, more equitable world, or social media perhaps, or away from that? What would be the consensus on that move, that hostile takeover by Elon Musk? And just on the chat, just go, yes, fairer world, or no, not. Elon Musk claiming that he doesn't even have a house anymore, right? Just lives on friends' couches. Okay, Kula says no. Sam says no. Jerry says no. Nobody thinks we're going to get a fairer world. Jack seems to be on board with it. You already said it's hostile. Oh, I let myself down there with language, maybe.
So I was banned off Twitter. So I got the Twitter ban. So.
Yeah, and Neva's never caught up with my following ever since. My humongous 1,400 followers. and gradually declining. Okay, there's not much yes here. There are better uses of the money, yes. Antitrust legislation, it will not create a fairer world as we have. Okay, wow. Did anybody think yes? Jitendra's put it in capitals. Marcus has resorted to his native tongue to make the point. Anna, oh yes, you're banned. Trump said he won't come back, didn't he? Gabrielle or Gabriel, Tom will come to you in a second. What do you want to say?
Hi there. We were talking about diversity, but I didn't hear neurodiversity. And we're getting a bit worried in the autistic community in the UK about how discrimination happens, and particularly in the recruitment and AI recruitment, particularly eyeball tracking, for example. Is there an argument for legislation? Because I don't think anybody wants to be allowed into an employment by a computer, and there must be some human intervention and reasonable adjustments in the process.
Nima, you could talk to that, couldn't you?
I can actually. There's a project I'm doing actually at the moment around facial recognition in recruitment, and actually that's what I spoke about when I came on a couple of years ago, was looking at how use for neurodiverse candidates and other candidates to look at facial recognition, looking at emotional AI, and look at the kind of eyeball tracking as well, where they were saying at that stage, and this is when I was early doors, and I used to think, wow, AI is so amazing. It was very early on. I was very naive, and then
I remember that.
Yeah, that phase was. I miss those days. They was really kind of like, gosh, they can actually work out what personality you are. They can work out, from just your eye movement, they can work out these things. And actually, a lot of the data that has come through since shows that they haven't and they can't. And so, one of the projects I'm looking at that, and there should be legislation, absolutely. Human intervention would also need us to do more work on, bias and so on. But because we know that the machines are biased as well. So yeah, absolutely, we have to have fairer recruitment, whether it's by machine or person, and especially looking at neurodiversity and Asperger's as well as in the chat.
As is often the case when you ask a question, you have an opinion as well. So Gabriel, do you have something you'd like to put forward about that?
A lot of our understanding about autism is theoretic, and my personal theory is that autistic people tend to be less emotional and would prefer direct questions with very direct answers. And the most direct answer is yes or no, which is the language of binary. So it seems to me that there's a great opportunity for AI to communicate with autistic individuals, but it has to be done sensitively. And we haven't quite got there yet. So I think that AI could be the great communicator between the autistic community and business, because of all the disabled communities in the UK, the least likely to be employed at the moment is the autistic community. So there's a great challenge out there. And I'm representing Aspirations, which is a social enterprise, which is trying to create a digital platform in this particular area.
Wonderful, and thank you for being here and bringing up such an important talk. We can't cover absolutely everything at one event, so you'll have to forgive us that we end up in certain parts of the discussions, but we are here every month, and this is, we hopefully got many years ahead of these discussions. Tom, your hand's down now, but I don't know if you wanted to make a comment, so I put you on the screen.
I hope I don't offend anyone, Richard. It's not my intent at all, but I want to chastise everyone just a tiny bit. Most of us care about AI and data science, and we just went heavy opinionated. I think we need to collect some data. Elon only recently acquired Twitter. Let's see what happens. Is it going to get better or worse? I don't know. I'm not going to claim. You know why? Because the data hasn't come in yet.
Words of the wise, Tom. Yeah, there's some strong opinions on the chat for sure about that, but thank you for adding that. Tom, just stay with us one more second, and I want to come to Maria. You do a lot of work raising people up, don't you? Particularly younger people or those career changing. What have been your experience in terms of making the future of work for everyone, but with a mentorship that you've been hosting for many years now?
Oh, the reason I've been quiet this whole time is because what I love to see happen is happening here. Everybody here is being led by a more together spirit until we got into the Twitter thing. No, I'm joking there, but seriously, I sense the spirit in this community is, I don't want to know more than all of you. I want to help you know as much as I know, and I want to learn as much as I can from you. That's the level of humility that Michael Faraday had. And the other greats like Maxwell and Einstein, always willing to learn from everyone and everything around them. And I applaud that. And you've built that community here, Richard. Thank you for that.
Well, we built that, but thank you anyway.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, great to see you. And let us know if you have any more comments. There's a few other people I've seen, by the way, that I want to call on, but I'm conscious that we've been trying to move to Maria for about 20 minutes now. So Maria, thank you so much for bearing with us. There was an element that I mentioned just before we spoke with AJ and Vikas about perspective. And at that time, we were talking about corporations, and you can look around a corporation and see literal physical diversity, but they're naturally very close to a problem. What have you seen in terms of externally, whether that's communities or outreach or sort of crowdsourced wisdom and so on? What are you seeing around the way to broaden perspectives on key issues like this?
Hi, thank you, Richard. Two things really. The first one is that when you look at what's happening on the ground, it's interesting that we're having all these conversations. But when you go back to what's happening on the ground, you actually realize that we do a lot of talking about these things. We do a lot of talking about diversity, but we don't do a lot of the doing. And when we actually do the doing, sometimes we just do it to tick boxes. And of course, there's a lot that is being done. Don't get me wrong, that there's a lot that people are doing out there. There's a lot that organizations and countries are doing out there. But what I see a lot now is a lot of ticking boxes. So in the community where I am, for example, a small example, I live in Ecuador. There are a lot of affluent Ecuadorian communities. And I live...
Can anyone else not?
Is it me or have
Yeah,
we
I
lost?
think, Maria, we've lost you.
Someone chainsawed her microphone
Yeah.
cable, I think.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
you're
think
back.
somebody muted me. Yeah, I
Oh,
think somebody
sorry,
muted
there
me
was
by
some
mistake
background
because I'm
noise and
using a
Zoom
different
moves the names
microphone.
around, so that makes it good fun for muting. My apologies.
All right.
You have our
No,
full
that's
attention.
okay. And this helps me. I don't know what you last heard, Richard. If you can help me out there, what did you hear last when I was speaking?
Ask Jazel, because I was trying to work out who the chainsaw sound was from as you were speaking.
Yeah, yeah, Jazel.
Yeah, you talked about where you were, and then Maria, pick up from about 20 seconds ago. That's where we were.
Okay, great stuff. So what I'm saying here, Richard, is that so when we look at the ground, what's happening on the ground, we realize that a lot of people are still being left behind. Yes, I agree with most of, especially what Dr. Nima said, that technology might drive us towards more equitable work. But I think that we need to strike a balance between really disseminating technologies and adequate training to allow everybody to adapt. Because a lot of the communities that we are working with, a lot of the communities that we see, they are really being left behind. And here's the thing, and it's something that has been said over and over again, that the current industrial revolution that we are entering, it really sits on the third industrial revolution technologies. And this digital revolution, the third industrial revolution, is still spreading and maturing. And in some places, it has not yet been heard of. And it's emerging in some places, and it's very clear who's being left behind. And I mean, we can agree that AI will create new equitable forms of employment, but we also know that some jobs will be lost. And this is where the problem lies, in my opinion, because we are looking at what types of jobs are going to be created, but at the same time, what types of jobs are going to be lost. And so as a result, so we're seeing an increase in the number of elderly people that are being affected, lower income cohorts that are being affected, as well as the people, as Timmy and John mentioned earlier, as people with jobs that are susceptible to automation. And this is a huge problem, especially in the developing world, where we continue to face this high unemployment rates and all the socio-economic issues. But it's at the same time, in the same breath, what opportunities does AI present for assisting in alleviating these socioeconomic issues in these developing countries? Yeah, I think I'll stop it there, Richard.
Yeah, Jazel, you have a question? I have one for Maria, but you go ahead if you want.
Yeah, I think in context to what Maria said, I would like to ask Sam rather on that front, because we are saying that, technology, we're talking about education. Naima also raised about education. So these are the two areas which are very tightly coupled. And do we see that there are actually gaps in what is being taught in the educational sector versus what is the demand into the corporate?
I mean, short answer, yes, I think so. I think there is a divide. I think when I think about this wider issue of the effect of AI and automation on the world of work, I mean, I think there was a McKinsey study recently, 800 million, up to 800 million jobs to go by 2030. Might mean upwards of 375 million people globally having to completely change the job function that they do. Amongst those, you've got people who can perhaps adapt, can learn to use AI to their advantage, can actually start to I guess be one of the ones that get to go along with this journey and aren't left behind. but there will be so many others. I don't know how that applies to them or how that they can retrain to be relevant in this new age. Interesting, I think it was Maria who said just now, which I completely agree with. She was talking about some of the kind of white collar jobs, and I think John talked about it earlier as well. I think they're actually probably at most risk of going sooner rather than later. The ones whereby humans are more costly. They're the ones where companies will be seeking to add layers of automation, add layers of AI, intelligent augmentation, that sort of stuff. And the people in those industries that will benefit will be those that have the education, training, understanding about how these tools can affect their work. It's that heavy domain knowledge, which will kind of set them apart, I think.
What white collar job could be gone by 2035, Sam, that would kind of shock us, in your opinion?
So I think it's not so much talking about what jobs that have gone, but let's say we talk about the case of a law firm. They might historically have had 10 paralegals on a case going through mountains and mountains of documentation. With automation and AI, perhaps a bit of natural language processing can understand those documents. So instead of 20, maybe you just need one paralegal, and that person can summarize the insights and make sure that the AI has picked out the key bits, that sort of thing. You can imagine similar cases for customer service, like Timmy was talking about, accountancy, marketing, recruitment, such as the industry I'm in. And actually, we've got to be also wary of when we're using these tools, what are the ethical considerations by not just the people who are creating the tools, but the people on the ground, those professionals, the accountants, the marketing people, the recruiters, using AI or data-driven tools in the course of their work. What ethical considerations about AI should they know? I put it in the case of my own industry. Let's say I'm working with an AI tool which is examining the advert responses I get for a particular data science job. Let's say the job doesn't offer visa sponsorship, and it's worked out over time that, generally speaking, the out-of-country applicants don't tend to have visa sponsorship, that sort of thing. You can imagine whereby if it learns too far or without too much context, or kind of without understanding the ethical considerations, it could then take that further, and maybe the AI system without knowledge is maybe eliminating people that don't have names which sound as anglicized, right? And that's a really controversial topic. But what if people who are applying for things are filtered out by unconscious bias built into these systems, or and whether or not we're using AI tools, automation tools, those unconscious biases might still exist. So it's not just a case of saying let's not use the tool, but how can we implement safeguards into those tools and educate the people using the tools in order to make sure we've got equitable results?
Thanks, Sam. And it makes me think of augmentation as well. And while I was in sales many years ago, and whilst the sales profession may not be replaced by AI anytime soon, it's not too hard to imagine that a salesperson that cannot adopt AI into their work would be far less capable and employable than one that could. You don't have to look far to see applications like Gong or Chorus.ai that are giving live real-time feedback to a salesperson on a call in terms of how much they're speaking, the engagement of their prospect, number of words and reaction and tonality and so on. And if you can't tune into that in real time and adjust what you're saying, then you're not going to be as useful as others. And you can imagine some people would find that very difficult in real time to adjust based on live data being fed to them, almost like a reporter in the field, with a volcano behind them that's got to deliver that to the camera and respond to what they're hearing in their ear. A real skill to work in real time. I want to come back to Maria a second, because I wanted to ask something about jobs, and then Sam, perhaps we could bounce back to you again if you don't mind. Maria, we've had this theme of dignity come about, I think, ever since Paul mentioned it earlier on, and we talked about job replacement and job losses. What's the bigger story there, do you think? Because there's probably no shortage around the world of getting people to do stuff in return for some compensation. But when we talk about job losses, it feels more that we're talking about the dignity of a job, on the security of a job, and whatever that means to you. Maybe that's colleagues, maybe that's a workplace, maybe that's a pension, or team nights out, or the ability to be promoted, or the ability to have HR support you through difficult things. These are kind of things we remember jobs having. versus, you know, the gig workers or the pay per hour workers who, yes, they get the money and yes, they do the work, but everything around that has gone. So which version of that are you referring to when you talk about job replacement?
You know, I think I'll answer you by telling you a very, very short story, if you would allow me. It just reminds me of when I was still working years ago, my very first and last job. I worked as a beauty therapist and I was a massage therapist. And I remember one day our boss bought this beautiful massage chair that could massage you and had temperature control, and it would do all sorts of wonderful things. And one of my clients sat on that chair. And after his session, he said, "Maria, do you realize that you've just been replaced by a chair?" And that was something for me, because I realized that this is a job that I loved. So for me, it was a skill. At that point in time, it was not just the skill, but it was my livelihood as well, because that's the only skill that I had. And I needed to massage a client so that I get paid and I go home and I feed not just my children, but my parents and grandparents and everybody else who's relying on me. So job loss for people in developing countries is actually livelihood, if you think about it. And then, so for me, I had to make a decision at that particular point in time. So what do you do, Maria? Am I going to compete with this chair? I cannot. I don't have the same mechanism in this chair. And I had to think, maybe I can collaborate with this chair. Massage people, give people the human aspect that they don't have. And then they get the chair, they get Maria, or I can be innovative and come up with other treatments that include this chair as well. Or I can just reinvent myself and upskill myself, which is what I ended up doing. Studied medicine, and then now I'm in AI. So I had to upskill because there was that need, but I had the opportunity to upskill. But how about the people that don't have that opportunity, that need to just feed the child? They need to feed the family. So job security and that dignity for me, Richard, is that part of taking care of what you need to take care of at this point in time, especially if you don't have the opportunities to upskill and to change, to reinvent yourself, to adapt. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's a wonderful example. Thank you.
I think circling back to what Maria just said, and I would like to ask Sam in context to that. We have been talking about upskilling, retraining, and the opportunities to retrain. How do you think you can, with this upskilling and the emerging industries, how do you align to that? Do you think that the generations which are coming in, they're prepared for this, the Gen Z, what we call, are they really prepared for this, the changes that are coming in?
It's a good question, and not one that I will profess to know the full answer to at all. I think the world that we're going into, I think, yes, having knowledge of data science or AI and all that is great, but even in those sorts of roles, domain experience is so highly sought after and is actually often the guiding principle, the driving force behind whatever the role is. If you're a data scientist for a finance company and you come from a stocks background, or you come from a medical, and you're in working with data scientists in a bio company, I think that shows some kind of clue as to maybe how we might kind of tweak the education system in order to help that going forward. So I'm a big believer in the kind of AI and type model. So if people are studying, languages or medicine or biology, actually having modules as part of the education system where we can understand the impact on emerging technologies on our traditional subjects, how we can utilize those, how we can exploit those for good, and how we can tackle a lot of the kind of social issues which are affecting the world through these technologies. Because I think that is largely what Gen Z is really passionate about. It's about having an underlying purpose to the work that we're doing. I'm in two minds as to whether I think that Gen Z is less money motivated. I think that probably comes from a lot of different reasons, housing being on a table, all the rest of it. But definitely what's clear is that ethics, values are key, social issues such as diversity and inclusion, the purpose at work, affecting dealing with climate change, work-life balance, remote working. These are the things that the younger generation care about. And of course, they're very digitally savvy. We've grown up in a world where from the ages of 5, 6, 7, we've had laptops and tablets and smartphones, and we've grown up with these technologies. And as a result, I think young people are coming through at the moment and maybe in a sense more malleable, maybe more willing to try and adapt some of these new technologies, and maybe that will be the kind of saving grace of Gen Z in trying to adapt to this new world.
Just take a quick pause here for a second on the conversation. I've just invited Animesh onto the spotlight here. We produced an article via MKAI written by our research manager, Animesh, about making the future of work for everyone. I wonder if you could just say a few words about what you wrote, Animesh, and then I'll share the link so people can access that.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you to all the people who have joined and sharing the knowledge on this very important topic. So while preparing for this event, we have came across a lot of questions regarding the work of future of work. And in pursuit of exploring some of those, we have published a blog post titled "Making Choices for the Future of Work." We have tried to understand the problems that this technology is solving, as well as creating, and what are some of the choices that organizations can actually make to realize the true potential and benefits of AI, which is more equitable. We have realized that we need to be very attentive to the choices that we make in how we implement this very robust technology that is artificial intelligence, so that they respect the individuals and workers and treat them with dignity as we are discussing it. And when we think about artificial intelligence, we always need to put people first. And this is also one of the core principles that we follow at MKAI. The technology is just a tool, and individuals are not passive actors in how to use and shape these tools. So hence, while looking at the future of work, it is very important to remember that AI-driven changes are not derived externally. Individuals can actively shape the changes that this technology is actually bringing in the workplaces. And to do so, for machine learning and artificial intelligence, we need to make certain choices. And we are focused upon alignment and incentives in this particular blog post. An approach to this can be to develop the technology to complement labor tasks by embracing innovation to imagine newer possibilities. And moving ahead, the differences need to be reconciled among all the parties involved, and the incentives need to be aligned from top to bottom. Like obviously this is easier said than done, but the path favoring complementarities is a natural choice. When technology is used as a tool in innovation, it can give workers a lot more freedom.
Vanuatu, UK, South Asia. So I'm
Which this will definitely result in increase in productivity and social development of labor that can ultimately advance the quality of life of the workers as well. The recent development in artificial intelligence holds a lot of tremendous potential, but realizing this potential is up to the choices that we actually make, and these choices will shape our lives in the future of work. And in the end, we would really appreciate if you could give it a read and comment your thoughts about it, so that we can together work on this very important issue to discuss some solutions for a smoother and a more humane transitions toward artificial intelligence in the workplaces. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and congratulations on your article. It's a great read. It's actually,
Thanks,
according to our website,
Animesh.
a 4-minute read. So that's a pretty swift read. James, I've got a question for Timmy, but with you, if you like.
Richard, I think you froze.
Uh-oh.
I'll.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sure. Thanks, Animesh, for that insightful blog that you have written. And I think we have to consider both the sides of the coin, basically the advantages and what the future of work is going to bring in. So in context to what you have said, Animesh, I'll go on to Timmy. Timmy, because I think Sam also raised the points of ethics very quickly. So I would like to ask you, what is the role of policies, regulations, all around this future of work? How important it is, and what are your thoughts around it?
Well, basically, what policies can do is provide an environment, right, that can drive the core of what the direction should be in terms of what the future of work entails. And one of the key things about policy is also the fact that policy can also help in shaping that foundation on those core principles of people, productivity, and sustainability, as well as even helping with closing the digital gap, right? And there's something about the digital gap that I find interesting. And the fact that when we talk about the digital gap, there's a tendency to think of the big picture in this context, in terms of digital gaps across national boundaries, right? But then when you look at it, we are all guilty of that gap. So for example, as AI evolves in the workplace, how many of us dictate our emails, right? We're still stuck in typing it out, and tools that are evolving, such as CRM, right? Digital assistants. So the fact about it is the fact that driving that digital gap is just beyond just considering that digital gap from a national perspective, but also looking at it from an individual perspective. How do we help individuals, right, through policies to ensure that they can also upskill themselves to be able to partake in what the future of work holds? And that itself is quite key in the context of it all.
Glad to be back with you after my internet kicked me out. I wanted to go back to something, Timmy, you said right at the start, PPS, people, productivity, and sustainability. I mean, it's easy for me to get behind you with people and sustainability. But then when you talked about productivity, you said things I wasn't expecting. You talked about culture as well as impact and profit. Do you feel productivity is still the right word in 2022, if that's the kind of things you're referring to?
Well, yes. There seems to be a new definition of what productivity is, right? So, for example, MKAI as an organization may not be focused on profit, but focused on impact. And when you take a flashback of what you're doing, you're being productive, right? But it's just that it's not profit-driven. So, in that context,
we're just really bad at that, Timmy. You never know.
It's not profit-driven enough to, put you on that private jet, but it's impactful enough to have a president put you on the private jet to come, develop policy frameworks in their country. So the point there is the fact that productivity is key, because when we talk about people, the conversation about people is quite important. But if you are talking of work and the future of work, it must be all-encompassing. Right? So when we look at the stakeholders, for example, startups and business people are focused on productivity. They want to make profits. They want to make impact in that sense, right? That's what the organization is focused on. But then you can't do that without people, and you can't do that sustainably, in order to build something. So that's why we need to bring in that key factor of people, productivity, and sustainability. You cannot leave the development of anything to business people. They would only be focused on profit. How do we make profit? And that's where policy comes in. And that's why, Josel, the question you asked about policy is key, because you must have policy framework help balance that important principle of productivity alongside with people and sustainability. And that is it.
Yeah, it's well said, Timmy. Josel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think regulations is the key, especially at the pace with which the tech is moving. And we are talking every time about equity, digital divide. then regulations and policies is the entire thing which is going to help people to upskill and become relevant into the market. And as Maria really highlighted, sometimes it means a livelihood for somebody. So it's the key to build the policies and regulations which are fair and ethical as well. Naima,
Yes.
circling.
Sorry, Jason, can I chip in something on this, please?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So there's a danger between putting regulations and policy in the same box, right? Because regulation is a key part of policy making, but policy making is a broad spectrum, right? And the logic is that you cannot over-regulate innovation or else you kill it. That is it. But policy is a key part in the sense that policy is not just about regulations. It's about the actions and inactions of government institutions and institutions that drive society towards achieving a certain goal. And that's where policy framework comes in, right? In the sense that what is the body language or the direction that political leaders or institutions of governance, including non-state actors, international non-state actors, what is the body language that they are driving towards? Upon what principles are they driving that towards? And how is that impacting investing in certain core areas that can help evolve artificial intelligence in a way that is suitable for the future of work? So I think that's one key point there that I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Timmy. Over to you, Richard.
Yeah, I think it might be useful. I mean, so one thing that comes up on these conversations every month is that talking's brilliant, but is it always enough? And it's a fair comment when it comes up. And so I wanted to make a quick announcement about an MKAI initiative. MKAI, if you don't know, stands for Morality and Knowledge in Artificial Intelligence, as we've evolved to take on our new name. We're a global organization with community members, individual contributors, I think across more than 55 different countries now, and pretty much all continents. We make our living from winning new projects, and we hope that those projects do immense good in the world, and that's always our aim. And there's one initiative that we are self-funding and starting ourselves, and it comes back to that word perspective that came out earlier. And if we want a future of work that works for everyone, we have to be able to see things differently, and we have to see broader perspectives. So we are focusing on AI risk. And by that, I'm talking about the biases, but also the harms, the prejudices, the errors of judgment and exclusions and so on that can happen. And we want to come at this problem, with a breadth of diverse perspectives. Some people will know this as multi-stakeholder feedback or diverse inputs for AI risk. And this is the group that we are collating together. We're up to tens of people now. We're looking for hundreds and then thousands, because we want this to be the premier collective of people in the world that can use their unique, or we can use our unique lived perspectives to look for the potential harms in AI, not because any of us is claiming to be an AI expert or a data scientist, but because when you get enough sets of eyes and experiences on a problem, you can see things that many won't see simply because they're too close to the problem, or they're suffering from groupthink, or they're encountering their own biases. So the project will be with governments and corporations, where we will translate the work that's going on. So what are the objectives? Why they're doing it? Where's the data coming from? What assumptions have they made? And then we will play that to our community in various different ways and forms to get different perspectives, so that somebody can raise a hand and say, why is that happening? Why have they made that assumption? Why do they think that that would cause that? Because from my experiences, it doesn't. And we curate those and collate those and place those back into our end clients. And hopefully through doing this, we will absolutely broaden the perspectives around the world in AI. We'll hopefully help companies to avoid some of the mistakes that they make, but most importantly, we will reduce those harms. We will move towards our mission of a kinder, safer, fairer, and more sustainable world through having this diverse perspective, which, by the way, might become law at some point, particularly in the US and the EU. And we want to be the organization that's building and creating that. If you're not involved in this, you just simply DM me now, and just DM your email address to me. I'll get you invited to the next briefing call. They're a lot of fun. They're well attended. You'll learn more about what we're trying to do and the models that we want to build. We're going to be using Web3 in this in the future, tokenization. You know, this is, again, it's not a Ferrari buying exercise, right? This is us trying to really impact AI as best we can by de-risking it. I see a few email addresses coming over to me. That is wonderful. Send them to me. I'll get you invited, learn all about it. And thank you for giving me a little bit of time there to talk about the next initiative that we're working on. I think, unless anybody radically disagrees, I'd like to cancel these spotlights, which I thought was one click, but doesn't seem to be now. So I'll do that manually because I want to hear from some other people in this room as well. So I'm just going to click these buttons. If people are doing it with me, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And we'll go back into the room here. Yes, definitely unspotlight me as well. Thank you so much. And I want to see, you know, you don't have to have your video on, your microphone can be on, but let's change gears a little bit in this session. We've been hearing from our invited guests now, and thank you for the email addresses that are coming through. We've been hearing from those. We've heard from a few others in the room as well. But, you know, I see others that maybe have been influenced by this conversation or bring some perspectives that we haven't heard so far. I'm going to call on some people who've got the cameras on. Just let me know if you don't want to speak. But Anna, you've been sitting through this today. What kind of perspectives have you come to from this?
I really like the definition that was given of productivity, because yeah, sometimes people tend to equate that with just more stuff, but it might also be other ways of impacting. I think it's a great thing, and I love what Maria said because I totally agree with her. But what I would like to do is to read a poem that came to mind as the conversation was going on. And part of this group, what we do is noticing what other people are doing, how other people are think, so that it helps us to assimilate and create our own version of whatever we're thinking. And someone said that noticing can be a devotional act. So senses gives us the notes that give cadence to life. How we weave, and not only what we weave, creates the lasting connections that build a family, a home, a friendship, a community, a world.
Thank you so much. And one of our poets in residence, I don't know how we ended up having poets in residence, but we like random things like that, don't we? So thank you so much. Buzzy, you've had your camera on in this meeting. What's on your mind?
I think you're still on mute, Buzzy.
Okay, I think I'm muted now.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening or morning, wherever you are. I'm based in South Africa. So I've received quite a lot of insights from this conversation. It's been quite insightful for me. I work as a change manager for a particular bank here in South Africa. And so for me, I think the insights has been, I've actually observed that we struggle with resistance from people whenever we are changing into, and we pride ourselves as a digital organization, or we want to be a leading digital bank. But I find that there's actually a resistance from people, younger and older. And I think I'm actually interested, and I don't have an answer, into how do we really pull people in the journey, where there's those fears that Maria made an example of, that if this actually happens, my livelihood is at stake. And it's, so how do we practically pull people up or journey to say, let's journey together don't have that fear. I think I usually haven't found a place where I'm still stuck on how do we take people forward with us in the digital journey, even as a change manager, without doing it as a tick box. Because I sometimes find now, if you're employed, then most people do it as a tick box exercise. I've done this, I've taken people, but you haven't really. They are still afraid at their core. They are still afraid of the move. They are still afraid of whatever we are implementing that they deem is going to replace their jobs. But I've really had great insights. I think that it was important. Insightful for me, the dignity, the difference, and the difference I think Anna mentioned as well between productivity and impact. I loved that, but I would still love to hear if there's anyone who has an answer of how do we really help people to journey with us truly and not as a tick box. Thank you.
Wonderful question. I would love to open it up to the floor. You don't need to put your camera on, but your microphone on will be wonderful. Who can share an anecdote or an example or a thought there for Buzzy on that question about how do we pull people along for this journey rather than just tick boxes? Sam, do you want to say something to that?
Yeah, I perhaps naivety on my part, but the immediate thing that comes to mind is engaging people on their concerns. I think sometimes companies, corporates, organizations, they can have a tendency to, try to brush over some of these things that maybe where people are concerned. This is what we're doing. It's a tick box. Everyone's got to do it, and they don't quite understand why. What the impact will that have on them, their jobs, their livelihoods, etc. And I think sometimes if you can engage people on a much more human level, against the backdrop of what all this automation and AI and everything else, I think that human touch and really engaging with your employees, with your customers, with your suppliers on how might this affect things, what are the impacts, and hearing their concerns genuinely and taking it from there. I appreciate that's probably not going to work in everyone.
See where you're going. Dina's turned a camera. I was going to come to you earlier, actually, Dina. So I want to ask you about this a second, because I kind of feel we've been chatting about this anyway, haven't we?
As it happens, I do have some thoughts about this, but look, I think that we really need to understand people, and we really need to understand the strengths and weaknesses that we have. And I'm going to give you a few examples. All things being equal, in any group of people, you'll have people who will adopt change and will like it and will see opportunities. You'll have people who don't, and you'll have people who will need a little bit of persuasion, or they'll need to think about this and find an angle which will be good for them. And so we will always have this problem. And we need to understand that. I mean, our aspiration seems to be, and I understand it because I used to have it myself, about, I don't know how many decades ago. Our aspirations is that if we move at a certain pace, and if we see something good, and if we see opportunities, everyone else should, be united and follow through that with that opportunity. But that will never happen. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to establish a baseline from which we act, so that we are not disappointed, so that we understand what are the chances of success and failure and effort. And the baseline is what we would like ideal to happen will never happen. Why? Because we are human beings. Why? Because we have a biological brain that always, will put brakes on the paths of change, of transformation, and so on. So really, for me now, the objective when I work with people is to accept whatever comes my way, and to accept where people are and what they do, and to understand that there is a limitation to my impact if I want to have one. And that's how it is. So what we can do, and we are doing constantly, is refine those methods and let's say models and approaches and motivational factors and technology and all the instruments with which we can facilitate the process. But the process will always have a third of people who will say no. So I'm not sure if this makes sense. I was actually, the little conversation I was having with Richard was about the fact that I believe that more than anything else, we all collectively need to be inducted in psychology and social sciences, because once we understand this kind of, base camp parameters, we work from there and our expectations are set properly. There are things that will never ever happen no matter what we do, but what we could do is to improve the methods and the way we act in order to make the adoption, let's say, and the change and the improvement a bit faster, a bit easier, more satisfying, maybe get a percentage, a little bit more people in this other camp. But there are limitations to, to human nature and to the diversity of approaches. I always work on the basis of 30, 30, 30, really, 30%. If I am in a room of 100 people, I'll think, okay, about a third of them will be inspired by what I say. About a third will not get it and will say, yeah, I'm not interested. And half of them may come back, ask a few questions, and maybe they'll go yes or no. So I could split the other 30% into one camp or the other. But we need to accept certain realities of the human nature and the nature of the society, which is incredible. I'm a psychologist, but in the last decade or so, I've been paying attention to sociology, because obviously I study sociology as well, philosophy and ethics. I am paying more and more attention to the tremendous impact that society has on individual behavior, individual choices, the history, the socioeconomic climate, what means the group. And it's extremely powerful, to the point almost of saying that actually individuality may or may not even exist, in the sense that we are so pushed and formed and influenced by the groups around us, starting with families and friends and, the tribe, the so-called the people we are amongst, and that it's extremely powerful. And I shall stop here. Hopefully I've placed a few ideas that are helpful with this.
I could listen to you all day, Adina. So I was just sitting back.
I'm passionate about this, because it's, in my old age, I'm beginning to understand certain things, and I think life would be much easier if I understood this 20 or 30 years ago, when I was kind of banging my head against the walls thinking, why is this not happening? What's wrong here? Why can't we produce miracle? No, we can't. This is it.
Yes.
If I may add, it falls under the normal curve. You see this normal curve. You have the early adopters, you have the innovators first, then the early adopters. The early adopters pull in kind of the middle, and there's the laggards that will not change. But there is, if you think about it, there's a circularity to things. If we think about, in terms, I'm thinking in terms of the Native Americans or other indigenous tribes, they have refused to change certain agricultural aspects. And now we found that, all this modern stuff that we brought in, all this new technology, we're now going back to circle and going back to those native ways of doing things and finding the value in them rather than having a change. So I believe there is a value on having a certain number of people not change, because I think just like if we look at the agriculture and how we have come full circle and are really finding a lot of value in those native ways, that we might find some really important value that we're not seeing in the things that we're changing or innovating, and that we're going to come back full circle and go back to finding that there's some truths and realities in there that it would be a good idea to preserve, so that we can pay attention and learn from them. So that's how I see it. And I'm just adding a little bit to what
I mean, this kind of
Adina
age
said.
of
And I think just to bring the two things together, what I'm also thinking is that we need to understand context. We are so not paying attention to the word context. And if I'd ask all of you, I will challenge you to define for me the word context, because there is no proper definition and everyone has got a concept of it in their heads. And what I'm saying is that in certain contexts, certain things may or may not, changes may or may not be appropriate. That's what I'm saying. So, change for change's sake, and I've been in business, and those of you who have worked in corporations and in companies probably have been through this tick box exercise, change for change's sake, like every year there is something changing. We haven't settled the old ways, we haven't something new, and nothing works. The old thing, the new thing, the next thing, the future thing, and people just change because they think change is good. No, it's not good. You need to consolidate, you need to embed something, you look at productivity of a certain change. So there is this kind of obsession with change as if change is good. Not always. It depends on context and opportunity and so on. But now I'll even turn the mic off just to make sure.
You've no need.
Just to make sure.
We'll close in about 10 minutes. Bazzi, you've unmuted. Did you want to comment on that comment?
No, I actually just wanted to say thanks to Anna and Adina, and as well as you, Sam. But wow, such a lot of I love this. The authenticity in your replies to my I'm very impressed. So change is not always good, and I like what Anna said as well. We might actually come back full circle, so we don't actually, maybe that 30, one of those 30 needs to be the one that's not changing, so that it preserves what we might actually lose by changing all the time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the feedback.
Thank you for provoking such an interesting conversation. I used to work in enterprise sales. I won't mention the company, but a bunch of you will know it. And there was only two strategies we had, right? It was sell lots of things to a lot of customers, or small things and a bunch of big things to a small number of customers. The only two strategies there ever were. And they would flip every single year and announce it like no one had ever thought of it before. And they'd go, do you know what? This isn't working. We should sell a few big deals to a few small customers, and they'd land it. And we go, all right, like 2 years ago, before we switched. Just every year it would change back and forth, and hilarious. But I think, what I'm hearing is that, we're in this kind of age of billionaires at the moment, aren't we? The age of tech billionaires. And some people will have us believe there's an inevitability to this, and it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're heading to the singularity, right? And I think, there's a sense of what I'm hearing here that goes, yeah, sure, but it's just a phase. It's not the future of the human race. It's just a phase we're going through. Take, money, robots, until we just move on it. But if we can't see a long enough timeline in our heads, then we just see this short-term inevitability about going into this despair of a techophilia.
Can I make a joke here just to lighten up? But there might be wisdom. Do we know, because I don't know, but do we know whether all these billionaires have got children? Because what I'm thinking, the thinking is they don't seem to have children as far as the first assessment, which means that maybe it's just one generation, and then their billions are going to be taken over by, not by a legacy kind of mentality, but maybe someone else will get their hands on it and just completely change the trajectory of this money. But right now I am a bit pessimistic, because it's just unbelievable. I mean, these people are trillionaires. They have so much money and so much power that comes with it.
You've got to sit down with a tech startup CEO and say, there's a good chance that you're going to make a lot of money. But you got to remember this, it's not down to you. It'll be all circumstantial. 9 guys the same as you will fail, but you will think you're special. You will think you have these billions simply because of the choices that you've made and the intelligence that you have. And you'll forget all of the circumstances, all of the luck, all of the help, all of the fact of where you're even born to start with.
Yeah.
And therefore, a little bit like Gollum on Lord of the Rings, you're going to start going, but it's mine. It's my money. And you know, we talked about this on LinkedIn a while back, but they say, you know, these billionaires, they say, oh, it's so hard to give the money away. Oh, it's not ethical enough. Oh, I can't be sure. Well, where were the ethics when you were making it? In your tech company, did you go, well, hold up a second. Are we absolutely sure there's no harms in our supply chain? Are we absolutely sure that no children are involved in the process of making our equipment? Are we certain there's no damage to the environment? Nothing. Then when it comes to giving it away, they go, oh, I can't give it away unless it's 100% ethical.
Yeah.
It's a mental illness.
But you see, they run the world. The 5 big tech run the world. We are talking about 5 or 10 or 20 people, frankly. Isn't that absolutely shocking if you think about this, that this planet is in the grip of five tech? How is this even possible? And the interesting thing is that they are even in the poorest countries, the most underdeveloped. Those countries do not have food to put on the table. Everyone has got a mobile phone, right? Everyone is somehow involved with the internet. Everyone is somehow manipulated in their thinking. Everyone is somehow tricked into financial scams. It's absolutely incredible that people with no food on the table do have technology in their hands and are being manipulated through those channels in whichever way they need to be used. It's unbelievable.
Yes, ma'am, yes. Maria, take us home today, last 5 minutes, and preferably on a positive note. Maria, you've unmuted. So what do you want us to think about? What questions can we ponder over the next few weeks until we meet again? What would you have us think about?
I think that drawing from everything that has been said, Richard, and also what Busi, Adina, and Anna also said, I think that we need to start thinking about those changes really from the top, and building and establishing trust between organizations and people and government, and even between people and technology, because that trust needs to be established. And also we need to start with also our education system. I think it's happening already, but I think it would be nice to see more widespread adoption of tech education in schools and in organizations. And again, not just in theory, not just to tick boxes, but truly fostering a culture of curiosity, continuous learning, creativity, innovation, upskilling the next generation, equipping them to create solutions based on their challenges, while again honoring their culture, bringing the AI ecosystem to communities based on their needs and values, rather than simply pushing technologies down their throats. And also, I would love to introduce another term here, because we always talk about encouraging all these other forms of intelligence, IQ, EQ, AQ. And I think that there is another quotient here we need to be focusing on. And I call it Ubuntu quotient, which is UQ. Because when we go back and we go within and find those things that make us Abantu, and the values we find embedded in most cultures, I think we will do better. We need to think about our moral obligations regarding our responsibility to others before we think about ourselves, our organizations, and also work on creating that balance between people and profit. You know, like Paul talked about Paul earlier in the beginning, I think he spoke a lot about human dignity with every decision that we make, and thinking about leveraging the best of people and technology, and not exploiting, but actually leveraging. So I think, in closing, Richard, I'll say we need to engrave the values of Ubuntu in everything that we do, be it in our technologies, in development, in our organizations, so that we can all echo with one voice: I am because we are. And if I can close maybe with a quote from one of my favorite authors, James Ogude, he says, and I quote, "We have the ability as people to dig into our human values, to go for the best of them in order to bring about healing and bridge the gap." I'll stop there.
I don't want to say anything. That's perfect. Jason, why don't you bring us to a close?
I think, Richard, I want to add one thing, that the work that you mentioned about the diverse inputs is absolutely echoing with what Maria just said, because the number of people who will be contributing to that is going to work as a whole ecosystem. And then the big corporates can realize that despite the data having the bias, because always the blame goes on to the data. It is said that the data has a history and the data is not enriched. And hence, sometimes the bias still exists because it is in the data itself. So if the diverse inputs acts as an input to the new machine learning models, I think, and the new policies, etc., I think automatically it will empower the data, and hence the model will give a better output. So it will bring about, I think this diversity will definitely lead to equity based on the amount of inputs that we are looking forward to, and provide that to the corporates because I know there are certain companies who want to implement it, but they don't know how, because they're just using the data which exists and they don't know how to change that. And the bias exists in the data and the model keeps learning from it. And to get rid of it, the only way is to get the diverse inputs. And it's not just a mindset change, but to get a scale of diverse inputs that much. I think, Richard, the project that you have been running is amazing. I think I want to look forward to the output of that one. That's my closing, from whatever has been said here about people, profitability, sustainability, how it is going to impact the future of work, etc. It will all depend on the diverse inputs, because one point which was mentioned on the comment, and that was tech brings exclusion, that is going to be stopped because of the diverse inputs. I think that's my closing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard.
Goodness. Some beautiful words, and thank you for your encouragement in that. I think I'll just, if anybody else wants to say a final thing, I won't stop you, of course, but I think, there's a pathway here in risk, particularly around the harms of AI that we see, and it starts with expertise, but I think we have incredible expertise already in our industry, and we know who they are, and I applaud their work hugely. But then it has to move beyond that, and I think that's where it hasn't got to yet. It hasn't got beyond the expertise into the diverse perspectives. So that's where hopefully we won't be alone, and certainly if someone else can do it, it's pretty hard, by the way, but if you want to try, then we're mad enough to try. That's all I'd say. And then beyond the diversity, when we get there, we have to move to inclusion. We have to think about 46% of people who aren't even online, who can't even contribute to the diverse perspectives that we have at the moment. And I guess that's our 10-year journey ahead of us. And it's, we'll do what we can, of course, but we do it together, and that's the key. And it'll be fun. Anybody want to make a last comment before I'll close and say good night or good morning? Nima, do you want to say something? Sam, maybe? Marcus?
Hey, thank you. Great discussion. And that's it, really, with great passion. And Jason and Maria's really, those last two comments, quite emotional. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Don't add anything to what was so beautifully put, but if you do have an after party, then I might jump in a little bit and go a bit wild. But I think these need to be, these are precious comments. They need to be guarded in within this frame. So I'm quiet, deliberately quiet, but if you do have an after party, then I might come along.
Well, I've promised to be somewhere, but I was hoping that Karen, who might give us a wave, would host for a few more minutes for those who still have a few comments to make. Is that possible, Karen? Yes, thumbs up from Karen. Wonderful. Okay, well, I'll be quiet now, but I say we'll leave the session over and we'll call it closed just 3 minutes after the hour here. Goodness me, it is a huge pleasure and privilege to be spending time with my brothers and sisters, all of you, and supporting and encouraging one another. There's lots of analogies today, but I feel if we're anything here, we're counterbalancing some of the weird stuff that goes on and just bringing hopefully a little bit more calmness into the world. If we do that in a day's work, I think we've come somewhere. So thank you so much, everybody. We're back in a month. Karen's hosting safety and avoiding harassment in the metaverse.